You all set? Okay. Good morning. I'm Jeff Sewell, Director of Operations at Franklin Community Schools. I want to welcome you here this morning. I appreciate you being here. We're going to spend a few minutes allowing Dr. David Clendenning, Superintendent of Franklin Community Schools, and Jeff Carnahan, President of Enviroforensics, to talk to us about the recent sampling work we've done at Needham and Webb Elementaries. And then following that, Mr. Stephen Henshaw is here, CEO of Enviroforensics, to talk about the City of Franklin's next steps. At the conclusion of those remarks, we will have about 10 minutes of questions from you, and that will be kind of our format for today. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Clendenning.
Thank you, Mr. Sewell. I want to thank everyone for coming today to learn more about our school district and our community. And I just wanted to say that we've had a lot of collaboration and effort to get to this point, and it started back last summer. In our district, we have 5 guiding principles, and collaboration is one of them. Systemic improvement is the other, and looking at making the best decisions for us. So as we look to make best decisions, we bring a lot of people around the table to help us with that. And that's when, in this early conversation of information that came last summer in July, we brought in environmental forensics to help us understand where we need to go in the next steps. As superintendent of our school district, I know education pretty well. I don't know the environmental side of life, and that's where we look to our experts. And so that's what we did. So we began testing on our own independently to verify that our buildings were safe, and student safety and staff safety is the utmost concern for us in the way that we do life and the way we're going to continue to do life. And after those initial tests, it was deemed from the data back, the buildings were safe to enter and begin school. In addition, environmental forensics did state that we needed to do a second set of testing results in the winter during the time. And so we just did that on March the 9th. And on Wednesday afternoon, Mr. Sewell and I received the data back that indicated that we had 2 out of 10 sites at Needham Elementary that were above the IDEM screening levels, and 3 out of the 7 sites at Webb Elementary. In just a few minutes, Mr. Carnahan will be here to go over the details of that and understand clearly what was going on. The decision to have an e-learning day on Thursday was made after consultation with building principals, my central office team, as well as other school board members, to make sure that we're doing what's right for kids and making sure that safety reigns supreme and that for our staff. Decision was made to have those 2 schools out for 2 reasons. The first reason was we received the data back that said there additional testing needed to be done. And I wanted everyone to clearly understand that student safety is important to us, and that was what we're going to do, and staff safety. The second thing was to get environmental forensics the opportunity to get in and begin the second round of testing that we're going to need to further indicate the next steps for us. They're going to continue to do that in the next few days, and you're going to hear more about that from Mr. Carnahan in just a second. It is our intention that when we receive the information back, we will gather together and begin looking at the future for us. And I'll just reiterate again that student safety and staff safety, it will never be my intention to put a student or a staff member back into a facility where there would be question of unsafe air quality. We're committed to having kids be safe, and we're committed to ensuring that the best learning environment prevails. We're going to begin the assessment promptly. It actually started yesterday, and it will continue through the weekend, and we look to get the data back soon. And with that, I'm going to stop for a few minutes and introduce Mr. Carnahan, who will come in and actually detail the results and next steps for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Hi, my name is Jeff Carnahan, and I'm here to help put some of the recent data into context and talk about where we've been and where we're going from here. As you all recall, in response to nearby contamination concerns, the school corporation collected a series of outdoor ambient air, soil gas, and subslab vapor samples in August of 2018 at Needham and Webb Elementary schools. The results of those sampling events indicated the presence of two chlorinated solvent compounds, TCE and PCE, in the subsurface at both school properties. The identified concentrations were below applicable vapor intrusion screening criteria, and there was no threat of an indoor air problem at that time. State risk assessors agreed, and they recommended that no further sampling would be necessary. Since the potential for vapor intrusion to occur can fluctuate seasonally as temperature, moisture, and ambient pressure conditions change, the school corporation pledged at that time to perform a follow-up subslab vapor sampling event under winter seasonal conditions. Additionally, the school corporation worked with their engineers to adjust the Needham and Webb schools' air conditioning units to increase the amount of fresh air being cycled through the buildings and to create a positive pressure inside the schools. Both measures are common responses to vapor intrusion concerns. These measures were implemented as an additional factor of safety. Both schools have been operating under these conditions since the start of classes last August. At the request of the school corporation, EnviroForensics performed the follow-up subslab vapor sampling event on March 9th by again collecting vapor samples from beneath the floors of Needham and Webb schools. The resulting data were validated on Tuesday and Wednesday of this week and reported to the school corporation on Wednesday evening. The results show that the subslab vapor concentrations of both TCE and PCE increased since the August 2018 sampling event, most likely due to winter seasonal conditions. 2 of 10 subslab vapor samples collected from beneath Needham and 3 of 7 samples collected from beneath Webb contained concentrations of TCE only above the screening level for a residential occupancy scenario. The conservative subslab vapor screening level for TCE is 70 micrograms per cubic meter. The exceeding values from beneath Needham are 96.2 and 100 micrograms per cubic meter. The exceeding values from beneath Webb are 242, 849, and 225 micrograms per cubic meter. Those values are represented on these tables beside me. None of the subslab vapors collected from beneath Needham or Webb contained concentrations of PCE above the residential screening level of 1,400 micrograms per cubic meter. I reiterate that these results are from subslab vapor samples collected from beneath the concrete floors of these buildings, not the interior air itself. A conservative interpretation of these data could indicate that the potential exists for some TCE to make its way through the floors of the school buildings to the indoor air. Given the large size of the Needham and Webb buildings and the proactive ventilation measures already implemented at the schools, it's uncertain if indoor air has been adversely impacted. As such, indoor air sampling is being performed this weekend with the goal of getting the results by the middle of next week. Upon review of the indoor air sampling results, the school corporation will know if and when additional indoor mitigation measures should be initiated.
Okay, at this time, I would like to invite Mr. Steve Henshaw, CEO of EnviroForensics, to talk about the City of Franklin's next steps.
Thank you. I'm Steve Henshaw with EnviroForensics. We've been the technical liaison for the City of Franklin since about September of 18. And our goal really is to provide input to the mayor and the oversight of the work that's going on in the city. So we're intimately involved with the Amphenol site. We're also now involved in assessing while the school and Mr. Carnahan are more focused on the school itself, the potential impacts to students and teachers, and mitigating measures to the school. My focus on behalf of the city is really to look at what's the causation. And so we'll be initiating some work on behalf of the city and working with IDEM to look at the sewer corridor that's running in a north-south direction along the schools there, and to collect samples, much like we did when we started off with the oversight of the Amphenol investigation back in September. So to that point, we'll be collecting soil vapor samples in the sewer bedding and working with IDEM, who is committed to collecting samples in the sewer itself. We'll be looking at that to see if we can identify some sources that may be contributing to the results we're seeing in the subslab samples beneath the schools. The IDEM has done a significant amount of work in this area, so we have some groundwater data. It did not indicate any VOCs above detection limits or above regulatory drivers. And so now we're going to look at some other pathways, and people following the Amphenol investigation realize that these sewers the bedding itself, if contamination enters the bedding and the preferential flow, that vapors can migrate along those sewer corridors and utility corridors. So that's what we're going to be focused on. But currently, our main emphasis is on the protection of and the assurance of protection of the children in the school, and looking at the indoor air over the weekend. We'll be collecting those samples. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we would take your questions from the media.
Superintendent, are there plans to test any further beyond elementary?
Thank you for the question. At this time, we'll continue to look to our experts for that. And so I'm going to actually defer to Mr. Carnahan.
Last August, we did an evaluation of the locations and the proximity of the existing schools in the corporation as it relates to known other sources of contamination in the area. At this time, there was no evidence that any of those additional schools were under a threat of impact by those sites.
Mr. Carnahan, looking at the numbers that you all actually, like you called them preliminary, but many of these numbers are not small. These are well above the standards that have been set at 70 parts per billion. Can you talk about the seriousness of having levels like 829?
I think that the 800 number does stand out as an isolated exceedance, and certainly given the entire square footage of that building's footprint, if there is a potential for those vapors to come up through the floor in that location, there would be a dilution effect in the entire indoor air space in general. But yes, that one increase in that sample up to 800 is certainly something that we're going to be looking at very closely.
Can you tell us where?
Sure, I can show you right here. It is in the Webb building, and it's subslab sample number 3, which is right here in the northwestern corner of the building.
Is that a classroom?
That is, yes, inside of a classroom, or it could be on the other side of this wall in the hallway. It's, yeah, okay.
Right. What's the, as much as you can say, what is the risk this poses to kids who are in that classroom?
Well, you know, we're not going to be able to tell yet until we get the results of the indoor sampling. But the next sampling event does include samples which are co-located with the subslab point.
And I would just add that we're not going to make anybody at risk. You know, when we were tested in the summer, there was no indication based on the data that we received. Now that we have that data, we're continuing to look at various scenarios that would not put it back there. I will just say that if we get data back, the kids won't be going into that classroom or Webb Elementary. They'll be going to another place on our campus to continue school. But safety will definitely be the paramount passion for us. And then we'll let the scientists continue to figure out how to make that area safe again.
One
whenever the data comes back. Thanks.
Is there any possibility that both of those schools reopen?
At this point in time, we're going to continue to look at the data. Just like any other event, if it were a natural occurring tornado or something, we have contingency plans, and we do have those. Our guiding principle of systemic thinking continues to drive that. And we have several experts that have been trained by Cummins to help us think about how to make the best answer for us. And so we're looking at that. And I would just reiterate, we're not going to put anybody back in harm's way. And we will have the kids in a school setting if that were the indication.
The World Health Organization says that TCE is actually not, shouldn't be allowed in any amount, that it's not safe in really any amount. We know that there are these screening levels that have been set. What do you say to parents about even smaller amounts and going back to school with, even if you bring those levels down somewhat?
Once again, we look to the experts in the field, and IDEM sets the screening levels for us to indicate that, and we'll continue to look at the experts for that.
But considering what's happening here in your community right now, you have had a high level of pediatric cancer that has been over the state and national levels, and you have a concerned community about children. Are you willing then to send these kids back, even if there are still amounts of TCE in these buildings?
We're going to make it safe for everyone, and we're going to look to the experts to help us guys with that decision. And later this week, we'll be able to answer that.
Is there any indication right now, we're in Wisconsin, maybe the former Amphenol site at the elementary schools. Is there any indication this information is migrating over there?
It does not appear that the Amphenol site is contributing to. We'll still be looking into that, but there is data that would suggest it.
Could you say whether it's coming from the properties on Eastview where there have been renewed concerns about continued TCE and PCE contamination, the remanufacturing properties along Eastview?
Just to clarify, this meeting is not so much about identifying the source areas. As I mentioned, we are going out to collect data in the along the sanitary sewer, which will hopefully assist us in identifying potential source areas. So I hope that answers your question. We're not ruling anything out.
Are there cleanup plans in place yet for the elementary schools where these things were found?
Cleanup plans.
Any remediation plan for this, or?
The groundwater, to my understanding, has not been, we did not see the presence of TCE and PCE in the groundwater quality. So we're stepping out and we'll be initiating the investigation next week that'll assist us in better understanding potential sources.
Dr. Clinton, we know that cleanups like this are not, you are a school district.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to be able
Mm-hmm.
to handle what needs to
Mm-hmm.
happen in this situation?
Mm-hmm.
Because this obviously is ongoing. Does the district have enough money to take care of
Mm-hmm.
this situation?
At this time, student safety is number one. Are we paying for the test results and the data that we receive both in the fall and the winter? Absolutely we are. And we do have money set aside that would allow that to take place. We'll continue to be able to provide that in a safe environment. Down the road, we'll have a conversation what that could mean, but I would just want to reiterate that yes, we are paying for this. This is both taxpayer dollars, and I understand the anxiety and the stress around this. And I would just reiterate that we're going to do everything possible. And money is not the question right now. The question is, are our buildings safe to continue the journey of learning and putting all of our students and adults back in there?
But to follow up on that, the EPA is already in town. I'm asking that question to say, are you all thinking about asking the EPA to add you into what they're already doing, or to ask them to come in and to basically take over this?
At this time, we're going to continue to do what we need to do. If the EPA or IDEM wants to come forward, that obviously they're the experts in this. We're going to continue to bring home what we need to do for our kids and using our resources right now. Because I think we've all seen our response has been much quicker than what we've been able to see outside away from this. So I'm committed to making sure that we can do it as quickly as possible. And if other people want to join in and make the entire community safe, that's awesome. That's how it should be. At this point in time, my job as the leader of our school district is to ensure we have a safe school setting across all of our schools. But at Needham and Webb, it reigns supreme because of the data that we're receiving.
Have you thought long term, you know what, we're not even going to send kids back? Thought about that?
As I said a few minutes ago, we've thought about a lot of different options and variables along the way, and we're going to let the data tell us what's going to happen, and that's going to come back to us in the middle of this week.
I know there's a lot of different technologies when you guys are investigating this stuff. I know Edison Wetlands just did the 24-hour monitoring home near the Amphenol site. Are there any plans moving forward to maybe do any of that 24-hour monitoring and sampling in the elementary schools?
Yeah, we're considering using that technology and the benefits of that. I can tell you that for right now, the IDEM standards and the standard protocols are to do 24-hour sampling using canisters. Those are the approved methods that we're using right now. That doesn't mean that we're against considering other options as well.
Since these second results came back much higher, are we considering testing other areas of the city, retesting other areas?
I'm not really following when you say we, are we considering testing?
Enviroforensic considering retesting other areas of the city that it's already tested.
Well, our only focus on behalf of the city was to focus in on the Amphenol site back in September. That was what we started to do. I think our findings help facilitate and get some traction for a more aggressive investigation on behalf of Amphenol and their oversight of EPA, by EPA. So our work now will be to focus on collecting sewer gas samples along the sanitary sewer that is east of the schools, and that's where our focus will be right now. So.
What do you think, Jeff? You mentioned that you took these extra steps back in August when you did the initial sampling and found trace amounts, adding more air into the pools and that sort of thing. Do these numbers now show you that effort might have even kept levels from being even higher? I guess that's somewhat concerning because if you had already taken some extra steps and yet you still have these higher levels, what does that suggest about what's happening?
Okay, so Jeff's going to talk about the difference between the samples, which are below the concrete slab, and the work that's done on HVAC systems.
Right. So the extra efforts as far as enhancing the clean air circulation and creating a positive pressure, that is actually doesn't have any impact on the sub-slab space at all. And what that is really designed to do is just to, regardless of what is coming up through the sub-slab space, create fresh air, create clean, healthy air in the occupied space, and to keep it that way. So the fact that these sub-slab concentrations have come up, what we're obviously hoping is that the indoor air samples that we collect now indicate that those efforts have been successful and accounting for natural variation.
Two questions. For the school district, certainly this is concerning for our parents to hear this, especially when they hear it's TCE and PCE that are in question. What do you tell parents who are hesitant about sending their kids back to school after spring break, or the parents of these kids in the school in general?
I would tell everyone in our community that we're going to look out for their best interest. It is my job to ensure that we have a safe learning environment. And I would just tell them that to trust us. We've been transparent throughout the journey that we've been on and sharing data, sharing results. We're going to continue to do that. And if we get information back the middle of the week, we're going to get it back to them as soon as possible. I will just tell you that, I actually live near this area, and it has an impact, obviously, on the entire community. Obviously, and I have 4 boys that go to school here. I have a wife that actually works at Webb Elementary. I'll just be fully transparent. So as we look at the journey, obviously, I'm looking out for everybody's interest. And that's my job as the leader of this school district. And it's a great job. It's a great opportunity. We have an awesome community that's rallied around to continue to move forward. Our school has put forth the resources to answer these questions. And when we look to our experts to provide us those answers, we then make the very best decisions to ensure that we're doing that. And I'll just reiterate one more time. We're not going to put kids in harm's way. We're not going to put faculty in harm's way. We will continue school back on April 1st to get to the end of the school year for a successful 2018-2019 event.
Considering how long it's taken to get the results back, are you guys confident we'll get results here in the coming days?
Yes, well, I'm very confident we'll get them back based on the information that we've been able to receive.
But understanding the fluctuations of how testing works, of course, you did the summer and now we have the winter results. Will the results next week really be enough for you to be able to determine whether those buildings are safe?
We mentioned the winter conditions creating potentially elevated subslab concentrations. At this point, we waited until the very end of the winter conditions because that gives us a truly worst case scenario. Now you notice temperatures are getting warmer outside. We're actually in a reversal of that trend, and we're going to be heading more towards better conditions. And we would fully expect that in the summer months, again, we'll see those concentrations. If they're going to vary again, they would be reducing. So I think that we can be hoping for a downward trend in the subslab concentrations between now and the end of school.
Is there a bright line parts per million where we're above this, that it's unsafe, below it, it's safe, or is it more complicated?
As far as indoor air concentrations go, right. Well, just similar to subslab concentrations, those levels were actually established based on the indoor air concentration screening levels. We're using a residential occupancy scenario to be overly conservative. The indoor air concentration in a residential scenario, that bright line you're looking for is 2.1 micrograms per cubic meter. For perchloroethylene, you're looking at 42 micrograms per cubic meter. And those
would be unsafe over a very long period of continuous exposure.
That's correct. And just a quick comment on that, overly conservative residential occupancy scenario that is essentially built around someone breathing that essentially every day in their home for a lifetime.
I guess I'd ask, it's multiple samples, if it was averaging above or below that, or if we get one sample that's above that level, then it's a problem. But how do we, starting with that threshold, where do we go?
Obviously, any exceedance is of concern and needs to be discussed.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, very much for your time today. We've used our allotted time of questions. Our media and communication director, Robin Betts, is glad to take your calls. If you have additional questions, we'd be glad to talk with you about that. Thank you for coming today.